Okay, we're back at Cracks in Postmodernity. We have a very special guest today, who has been on here before. And because everybody was raving about that one episode you were on, we decided to have you back again. Joe Enabnit, who's many things. I would say first, you're a father, a gym owner, a pretty cool guy. Um, yeah, again, and at least a lot of our listeners, a lot of our readers think so. So back by popular demand is Joe. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for having me on the podcast. Very happy to be here.
Absolutely. So last time, yeah, I mean, we talked about a lot of things. You talked about owning a gym, owning a small business, and how for you it's, you really wanted it to be a community center, not just a place where, people go to work on their aesthetic, but a place that, brings people together. But then you've written a few articles for us. In the first print zine, you wrote about bodybuilding culture. In the Substack, you wrote about fatherhood. And that generated a lot of discussion because we see so much of this manosphere stuff, all these influencers talking about masculinity, reacting to, this revolt against toxic masculinity, as they say. And you were saying, these people perhaps have good intentions, but they're missing the mark. There's much more to fatherhood. And you can speak from your experience both as a son and as a father. So this is why I wanted to have you on. I want to know more about your experience and then more of your hot takes on the kind of cultural phenomenon we see going on. So, Joe, start by telling us about your relationship with your father, how much he influenced you, and then we'll get to your life as a dad.
Yeah. So something I've said before is that really one of the most important things about my life that I've come to realize is that I have had a good and close relationship with my father. And what that has done is it set me up to succeed in a lot of ways. I'm not talking about, making lots of money or anything like that, but succeeding in the sense that when certain trials and difficulties of life came along, the relationship with my father, whether he was directly involved or not in these trials was something that carried over and made a big difference in the way I dealt with these things. So let me to tell a little bit about the story. So my family, I have five siblings. Both my parents are working class, work long hours, and we lived in a very small house in a small town in rural Iowa. And so, there were a lot of challenging aspects to that upbringing, but we also had a very close knit family. We worked together to get through a lot of the problems and the hardships and the difficulties that come with that kind of life. And uh, to go to a particular story that I think is important. So when I was about 15, 16 years old, I entered into kind of a dark period of my life where, I'll talk about this more later when we talk about the gym. But suffice to say, I lost my faith in God. And so
Mm.
I became an atheist, kind of against my will. It was not my intention. It was not some rebellion against God or anything like that. But what ended up happening was, I went to some of the adults in my life. I went to our youth pastor and to our pastor. I had a religious family. We went to church every Sunday, that kind of thing. And I had all these questions for them. And I went on my Facebook and I posted these little rants, talking about what my doubts were, what my issues were, and
Yeah.
telling people, help me resolve these things. And what ended up happening was the youth pastor and the pastor and the community at the church, they were basically like, this kid's a problem, and he's got some bad things to say. So we would like it if you didn't come to the youth group anymore. Here's some
Uh,
books you can read. Let us know when you're normal again. Basically, so it was not a great experience.
yeah.
But so I'm dealing with this, and my dad has always been, since his conversion to Christianity as a young man. It was always a very important thing for him, and so I had no idea what he was going to say. You know, and I had been talking to people on the internet who said that their parents kicked them out of the house and made them homeless when they told them they didn't believe in God, and that they had all these terrible outcomes. And so finally, the time comes to confront my father about this. So I come home one day and he's sitting on the porch, and and he knows because everyone's told him, because it's kind of become kind of a scandal in the town. And so and what could he do? I'm so disappointed in you. You let me down. Whatever. But that's not what he did. What he did was he said, Joe, you are my son, and I love you, and I will always love you.
Wow.
And no matter what it is that you believe, I'm glad that you are not afraid to talk about these things with me, and that you're honest and telling me, what you're dealing with and what you're feeling. I hope that you'll continue to keep an open mind and to continue to be willing to discuss these things with me. And know that no matter what you say or do, I'm always going to be your dad. I'm always going to love you, and I'm going to continue to believe in my God and to pray for you. But it's not something that I can force you to do. I can't make you believe in God. That's something that you have to figure out for yourself. And so that caught me totally off guard. It totally disarmed me because I had
Hmm.
my guns up. I was ready. I had all these people pumping me up, telling me how brave I was for being an atheist and for being the town scoundrel. And here's my dad. Just he did not give me a cage to break out of. He was just like all right. And so and that even though it took me another 10 years probably to actually come back to faith in God, it was that moment always stayed with me because it was a moment of genuine sacrifice and fatherly love on his part. Because I'm sure that he didn't like some of the things I was doing and saying.
Hmm.
When I got involved in my college atheist group and we were getting up to all kinds of trouble and stuff, I'm sure that hurt him badly to see, but he never let me feel like his love for me was conditional on me being a Christian or me being respectful of
Yeah.
religion or anything like that. And so that kind of thing is disarming, almost in the way that nonviolent resistance is disarming. Where the agents of oppression can beat you only so long before they start to feel bad for the things they're doing. And likewise, I could only be a militant atheist for so long before I started to feel like a real jackass for the way I was acting in the face of all the love that I was receiving. And so, that to me is reminiscent of a biblical example of fatherhood. In the story of the prodigal son, we have people often talk about the father as if he were an example of God's love for us in forgiveness, but he's also an example of earthly fatherhood and earthly fatherly love. Because what does his son do? His son has gone out and wasted all of his money, besmirched his good name, brought shame to the family, made all these terrible mistakes. And then when the son comes back, the father, does he stand at the doorway with his arms crossed and say, "My son, you have disappointed me"? No, he runs out into the field. I like to imagine in the story that the father is like in his bathrobe with no shoes on, and he is
Yeah.
so overcome with joy to see his son come back that he runs out into the field to meet him, right? And
Hmm.
that is ultimately what being a father is about. That is what our job is. And there's so much more that could go along with it. And there's a lot of different duties and jobs you have as a father depending on your family situation and what your kids' personalities are like. But ultimately, it just comes down to love and to
Yeah.
unconditionally loving your kids, and that's priority number one.
Yeah, and I want to get into like the actual task of being a parent in a second, but I do want to kind of like break down your father's response because we see, a lot of parents struggle, especially when it comes to like ideological or moral things with raising their kids because you'll have some parents who are extremely permissive, anything
Mm-hmm.
goes because, they want to be tolerant, they want to be accepting, but in the process, teach them no boundaries, no values at all. And then you have the parents who are very reactionary, who, if the kid says, I'm an atheist or whatever it is, that's controversial. It's like, oh my God, you failed me, you're a disappointment, I'm going to kick you out. Neither of which really serve the child, help them to grow. And the other thing I think I said this to you on the phone is like how you were kind of shocked by your dad's reaction. Like you were kind of baiting him so that he can react, and then you can perpetuate this narrative of like, oh, my religious family won't accept me. I need to rebel more. But the fact that you're saying like he didn't put you in this cage, it's like, well, now what am I rebelling against? And I don't know, like when I'm teaching and I have parents who have come to me asking like, what do I do for my kid because they're rebelling and this and that, I'm like, have you ever heard of reverse psychology? Because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's how kids work. Parents say one thing, they want to do the opposite. So obviously, if you make a big stink about like, you better go to church or don't have sex or don't do this, of course they're going to do it. Whereas, like, if you actually reason with them, if you, again, like, you keep certain standards, certain boundaries, but also balance that with accepting their freedom. And more importantly, explaining why, like, this is why I have this rule. This is why I want you to do this. Like, then it kind of breaks through that rebellious facade, but easier said than done, of course. But then I don't know, but like the beyond just like the again the moral, the ideological, religious, all that. Like from what you've told me about how you are as a dad, like it's really crucial that you not just tell your kids what they should do or what they should believe, but like you actually show them how to live. Like you actually have to teach them how to function in the world. Um, so I don't know. I'm curious, like looking at what you've learned from your father now that you're a dad, what is it most important for you to teach your kids? Like, what do you want them to know, not just to believe, but what to do with their lives?
Yeah. So something that becomes really obvious very early on as a parent is that small children are completely helpless. Like
Mhm.
they, you know, this, on TV we see all this there's this trope of the small child who is actually more intelligent than all the adults, but that's not true in real life ever. In real life, a small child cannot even wipe their backside without your help for years. And then told repeatedly not to shove butter knives into electrical sockets. And then, after you tell them once, you have to tell them again and keep reminding them. And, and in this way, you have to provide some very careful guardrails for a
Yeah.
long time. And this extends into their adult lives where, they're going to make bad decisions and have bad ideas, and you have to find a way to give them appropriate guardrails while also allowing them to learn some of these things for themselves, because ultimately everything has to be learned the hard way.
Yeah.
If and you know and hopefully you can make the hard way as soft as possible, so hopefully they can figure out the electrical outlet thing without actually shocking themselves. But so something that um, I've experienced is that um, when kids are trying to figure out how to think about things and how to do things in the world, they do look to your example, but they also will notice anytime that you're a hypocrite, which we all do.
Yep.
And they like to exploit that and to point that out and to let you know. So, and there's two ways you can approach that. You can be super neurotic and you can worry that everything you do is being watched, and try to be more saintly than you can possibly be. Or you can take this approach, which I think is something that my father did, which is to just tell the truth, and to always tell the truth, and to always let your children know that the things that you believe are genuine and sincere, and that you don't just say them. And so, for example, with religion, my father and I have talked about Christianity and about faith and about God and about prayer and stuff for basically my entire life. And yet somehow, when it came to that critical moment, he didn't tell me you have to be a Christian,
Mhm.
because he recognized that that was not something he could do.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a fear that a lot of fathers have, is they have this idea that it's their job to make their child into a certain kind of person, but that's not the assignment. Your job is to, you have to raise them into adult life without dying, and you have to tell them as much as you know about the truth. But when it comes to making them into a person, that's something they do themselves,
Yeah.
and they, well, it's something from a Christian point of view, that's something that God does, and then they decide whether they want to conform to God's will or not. And so, you cannot put that kind of pressure on them or yourself to produce a superhuman child when
Mhm.
that's when that is between them and God, basically.
Can you tell us about a time that like it was difficult for you to own up to a mistake with your kids?
Yeah. So my son, love him dearly, amazing child. He is much like me as a child. He's not athletic. He's not very physical. He's not into sports. He doesn't want to do anything like that. And so I have this task of, I don't want to force him into athletics, but I also don't want him to be completely inactive, because I know that it's bad for him. So I try to put him into a position where he has things he can do, he has options, and I encourage him, but I'm not too forceful. But something I found is that I cannot coach my son. So as
Mm.
I my job is teaching people how to lift weights. That's what I do for a living. And so to but I cannot coach my own son because there's a difficulty there, which is that both of us take it too personally. So when I'm telling him, hey, you should do this differently, from his point of view, he's like, why is nothing I do good enough for you? He's 9 years old. So why is nothing I do good enough for you? Why is it never good enough? Why are you always criticizing me? But then from my point of view, it's when he won't do the thing that I'm asking him to do. It's like, why doesn't he respect me? Why doesn't he listen to me? Why would he? And so
Yeah.
I've had to really suck it up and recognize that I just have to be totally hands off with this stuff, which is hard for me because it's literally my job. But I found that when other people coach him in athletics, whether he's playing soccer or he's on this, he goes to this gymnastics class for boys called Ninja Warrior, where they do Ninja Warrior stuff. And I see him listening to the coaches there, and he doesn't take any of that personally. And he stands there and he pays attention and he listens and he does exactly what they say. And I'm just amazed by this. And at first I'm like, what are they doing that I'm not doing? But it's just because that's not what he needs from me. He doesn't need me to be his coach. He needs me to be his dad. And I should let them be the coaches, just like it's the same reason that people send their kids to my gym to be coached by me, right? Because they know that there's a division of labor and there is a kind of toxic overlap where most kids and most parents just aren't cut out to have a coach athlete relationship. And so, yes, that was a little bit tough, but it's going a lot better now that I just kind of keep my big fat mouth shut and tell him that he's doing a good job when he tries hard. And then when he doesn't try hard, I tell him, ask him how he's feeling about it, but I don't try to be too pushy about it.
Yeah, so I mean, let's get into that then. Like, how do you find the right balance between like correcting them, holding them up to a certain standard without being overly aggressive or shaming them? Like, where's that line for you?
I would say that it is crucial to always do it in a loving way
Mm,
and to always let them know that your love for them is not predicated on them being good at this or that thing or doing this thing right.
yeah.
And the strictness of the correction has to come down to how bad the immediate danger is.
Mm,
If the child is going to climb out the open window, you correct them with absolutely no hesitation and no wiggle room.
yeah.
If the child is wants to eat a lemon plain and they say, hey, let me eat this, you say, okay. And you let them figure out for themselves that it's not a pleasant experience.
Yeah.
um, it's not rocket science. I'm making it sound more complicated than it is, but it really just comes down to um, you try to treat them the way that you would want to be treated in the same situation.
Mm,
So so obviously, you don't ask a 5-year-old how they want to be treated because they'll tell you, that they want ice cream for every meal and they want to, not go to school and whatever. But if you think about if you were a 5-year-old, a small child with a in a big confusing world with lots of things around you, how do you think adults ought to treat you? And then you try to do the same thing for your kid. So when it
yeah.
comes to eating the lemon, it's a totally safe thing that they're always going to be curious about until they try it. It's like, all right, fine, eat lemon. But likewise, I wouldn't want any adult to let me climb out the window to find out the hard way what falling 20 feet from the airfield's like.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's what you're saying, yeah, like it's so commonsensical that I think we tend to overcomplicate, and end up screwing kids up more. But I don't know. I mean, I do want to get in before we get into like the manosphere kind of stuff. There are so many people in my age range who are very aware of their flaws, and because of that, they say, I don't want to bring a kid into the world knowing how I'm going to screw them up. I have all these psychological complexes. Why project it onto an innocent kid? What do you say to that?
I think people overcomplicate what being a good father really is. Like if you love your child and you treat them the way that you would want to be treated, that's all you have to do. You don't have to be some kind of Superman. You don't have to be this paragon of masculinity and mental health. You just have to love your child, and you have to treat them the way that a child ought to be treated. And anyone can do that. You can do that, whether or not I I had this. I posted this poll on Instagram the other day where I asked people, or it wasn't a poll, it was a question box where people asked me, or I asked people, What do you think it means to be a good father? And I had all these guys sending me messages, most of them young men, men who are like aspiring fathers or new fathers, and they say, a good father is a strong masculine man, a leader, a provider, and all these things. And those things are all fine, but they're not the assignment. And so I followed up with the question, what do you do? What if you get hit by a drunk driver and are paralyzed from the neck down? You can no longer be physically strong. You can no longer work and provide. You can't be the kind of man that you were before. Well, can you still be a good father? Well, yeah, absolutely. Because even then, you can still give your child the one thing that they need from you, which is your unconditional love. And that's all it really takes. So I would encourage anyone who's afraid that they would be a bad father to think, how would you do things differently from your own father? And if you can think of things like that, chances are you do pretty well. Or if your father did a good job, if you have a great father, then, be like him. My father had a very difficult childhood. And, by all, metrics, he should have been a statistic, and he should have been a terrible father. But
Mm.
he took the difficulties that he experienced and he turned them on their head. And he said, I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to love my children the way that Jesus has shown love to me. And that was all it really took to make that big of a difference. And I think
Wow.
all six of us would say that we love our dad. We have a great relationship with our dad. There's no drama there, and I don't say that lightly, because I know that for so many people that is a source of so much pain, is their own relationship with their father. And and I do my best to not take for granted the blessing that I have in mine. But so
Yeah.
that, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I would just add though, like, because I know a lot of guys, a lot of parents, mothers and fathers, who are aware of how their parents made mistakes. They want to break the cycle, they want to do better, but it's easier said than done. So I do think it's important, like if you're aware that, your parents had a lot of flaws, it is good to have some parental figure who becomes a point of reference for you as you're raising kids, because like the desire to break the cycle, I find sometimes isn't enough. Like sometimes you need someone who's going to be like,
Yeah,
who you can go to and be like, hey, I don't know what to do in this situation. I know I don't want to do what my parent did, but I'm not sure. How would you face this situation? Like there has to be something external to you, usually, to help you grow and break out of cycles.
yeah,
That's just my thought.
yeah, absolutely. I think that in that situation, you really do have to find a role model, and not in the sense of finding a role model who is like some ideal man or ideal woman, but rather
Hmm.
someone who is a role model in the way that they love, whether it's the way they love their children or the way they love others. And there are so many people who could fit that bill. It could be a good friend, it could be a priest or a pastor, or it could be just some kind person that you've met who shows you that kind of kindness. And it's there are places to look for it. I know that my dad, he found that in the scriptures, and he found that in his Christian faith, and he was able to look to God and to Jesus and to the various parables as examples of how to live. And so I would encourage people in that position you know to be open to experiencing loving relationships with people and to seeking out those kinds of people. If I didn't have a great father, I know that in my parish I've met so many people who completely shattered my expectations when I was first looking into Catholicism. I had this very cynical view of the world that nobody could possibly be holy, everything was fake, everyone's phony, nobody actually believes this stuff. And I met these parents and these children, these families who I could not believe how overflowing with kindness and love they were for everybody, not just their own family. And I'm sure there could be many role models in there. And I have some younger men at the gym who are in that spot where they've got problems with their family, and they've found, as their godparents, they found some of these parents from the parish to teach them in these things, and it's worked out pretty well. So I would encourage people in that position to first get off your computer and step out into the real world, and find that kind of support, find that kind of role model, in whatever kind of circle makes the most sense.
Yeah, so one more question though about like the millennial or whoever objections to becoming a parent. What about people who are afraid of losing their freedom, who think that being a parent is going to be exhausting and is going to take away their, their freedom, their happiness? What do you find? Do you find that you've lost, have you lost your freedom in being a dad?
I would say that the kind of freedom that comes from not making a choice or not making a commitment is a false freedom. It's a freedom that is predicated on kind of failing to take the next step, like a failure to launch. Now, you don't have to get married and have children, but the kind of freedom that is associated with not does, because ultimately it leads to regret if you never do make a choice. Now, some people choose not to have children. That's their choice, and maybe they regret it, maybe they don't. Some people have children, and maybe they wish they had done things a little differently. Maybe they find it difficult. I will not pretend like having children is easy. It has many challenges. I would say, in addition to just the daily life challenges of getting kids out of bed and getting them dressed and fed and all that stuff, there's kind of the emotional challenge that comes from having bringing these people into the world who have power over you, because your child, at least with me and my children, at least they have the ability to hurt me very badly if they wanted to.
Mhm.
And if something bad happened to them, that would be uh, incredibly painful to deal with. But it's the same kind of thing that happens with any relationship. Even with a romantic relationship, where when you get involved with somebody, it's not just about you, it's about them too. And you take on this certain risk of being hurt and this certain risk of things not going like you plan, but you do it because you know that somewhere in there is hidden this intensity of life and this intensity of experience, of passion, joy that is beyond comprehension. And so I would say that you choose to have children of your own free will, or maybe you do it by accident,
Mhm.
and then you choose to love them and you choose to live with them. And I would say it's not really any less free than the alternative. It's just that you've made a choice. And when you make any kind of choice, you close certain doors.
Yes.
But if you don't go through any of the doors, you're kind of stuck in the hallway. And so I would encourage anyone considering children to not be afraid. Like, yes, it'll be an adjustment, it'll be a change, but most of the things that you lose are things that you could probably do without. Like, I don't have the freedom to like stay up and play video games by myself until 2 in the morning on a weekday anymore. Big deal. It wasn't that great anyway.
Yeah.
Um, the I have a responsibility to take care of other people, but I found that has served as a great source of inspiration for me to do better in life. Because if I know that other people are depending on me, I'm going to give things my best effort as opposed to just doing enough to get by. So have
Yeah.
no fear.
Mm. And I imagine having a supportive community or a larger extended family network
Yes.
makes it much less daunting. Because then it's not just,
Yes.
oh no, me and all my problems and what I'm going to lose, but then it's like, oh, we're all in this together. You know,
Yes. And for
that's,
millennials, especially, because we're in this position where we don't have the luxury of being able to pay for a house and two cars and five kids with, a factory job
mhm.
like some of our grandparents did. But if you've got a mom at home who's maybe retired or who doesn't work very often, I guarantee, unless she's got problems, she would love to hang out with your kids so you can go and do something, or so that you can go to work. If you've got friends, you might have some friends who don't like kids, but you probably have some friends who do too,
Yeah.
and they are just waiting with bated breath for you to ask if they'll babysit for you, and they will be so happy to do so. And there's uh, children have this ability to inspire love in other people,
Mhm.
and it takes a very cold-hearted person to actually dislike children on a face-to-face level.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who feels like they need support, you don't have to look very hard to find it. You just have to ask, because so many people will drop everything to help you out.
Yeah, and this ultimately is what's missing from the whole manosphere, as you said in your article, and as you were alluding to before, that like when we're in this virtual context, the like you don't really your needs as an actual human being aren't really accounted for. Like if you have these, influencer father figures, like they don't know you, they don't know your personality. They're not going to call you out on your BS, but they're also not going to give you the love you need. And I think obviously like there's a good reason why a lot of people seek out these kind of influencers and this kind of discourse on the internet. But yeah, like without the relationship, without the communal dimension, like we can't really grow, So I don't know, like I don't know, like what else do you see going on in this dynamic between people, these young guys going online and their, virtual father figures?
Talking about influencers who talk about fatherhood specifically, something that I find very frustrating is
Yeah.
this idea that if you want to be a better father, you need to focus on self improvement. And it's
Mm,
like, if you want to be a dad, you got to be this ultra macho guy who wakes up at 4 a.m. and does jujitsu and takes cold showers or whatever.
yeah,
And the problem with that is that, I mean, it's good to improve yourself and to
right.
challenge yourself and to do these things, but when it comes to being a father, you have to not focus so much on yourself and focus instead on loving your family. And if you turn totally inwards and focus on all these ways you're trying to better yourself, and you convince yourself that I'm doing all this for my family, you become kind of a narcissist, and it's not a good pathway to go down. I look at some of these figures like David Goggins, who people look up to, and there's a lot of cool things that guy's done, but he kind of glosses over in his biography, getting married multiple times and having children who he is not involved with. And do you think that his kids are impressed that he gets up at 4 a.m. and works out 5 times a day or whatever? Probably not. They probably just wish he'd show up. And
Yeah.
similarly, you can be a super masculine, successful guy who works 80 hours a week and provides for his family and who, is a well respected member of the community. You can do all those things and be a terrible father.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think
So,
that's,
hmm.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I think this is kind of a good transition into the topic of lifting because, so like the father kind of influencer thing aside, like yeah, we see plenty of these people on the internet saying, yeah, like men need to stop being soy boys, stop being wimps, they need to lift, they need to do whatever. Um, and you're not, I mean, as much as you say like, okay, a good father doesn't necessarily have to all do all these things. They have to be a loving person. You also think there is a value to lifting. Obviously, you own a gym and you lift, you teach other people to lift. So I mean I wanna get into your philosophy of lifting. Why is it important to you, especially, as a Christian where a lot of people will condemn lifting, going to the gym as like it's vainglory, it's prideful, it's a distraction from more, you know, from spiritual
Mm-hmm.
things. What is your take into it? How did you get into this? Let's hear
Yeah.
the story.
So, to the last thing you said about people saying that the gym is a distraction and is vainglorious. Before I tell the story, I want to remark that the gym is a tool. Strength training is a tool, like a hammer. You can take a hammer and you can build a fence, you can repair a broken water main, or you can bash somebody's brains in and commit murder. And
Yes.
the hammer is very good at all three of those tasks, but only two of them are righteous, right? And so I think it is a mistake to disregard the hammer because of the hammer murderer, if you will,
Mhm.
when the hammer has so many practical uses. So as far as how I got into lifting, so people get into lifting for totally different reasons. If someone is like a natural athlete who's really gifted at sports, they probably have gotten into the gym or into sports or physical training just because it's always been a part of their life. They probably were immediately standing out in all the games they played as kids. They probably excelled in like school sports. Maybe they went on to college sports, professional sports, and they would probably be doing sports no matter what. And so they have kind of a different path from someone like me. Um, but I don't have any of those things. I'm not naturally athletic in any respect. I didn't play any sports. I was a fat gamer kid all throughout school, very unathletic, and made very slow progress when I did start working out. And so for me, and people like me, the gym was a totally different tool. So I started lifting after what was probably the darkest period of my life, which was shortly after my descent into atheism. Right, I kind of withdrew from my friends. I quit any extracurricular activities, and I would go to school, I would go to work at my fast food job, and I would come home after my parents were in bed, and I would get on my computer and I would look at 4chan, look at pornography, and play video games until like 2 in the morning. And I did that every day for like a year. And so I gained a bunch of weight because I was working at a fast food restaurant, and so it was like the days. It was like one day was as long as a month, and a month was as long as a day. It was like the the veil of reality was kind of bending around me. It was a really rough time, and I was able to come out of it by chance because I encountered two figures. I encountered Mishima on 4chan,
Wow.
and mostly in the form of like quotes on pictures and stuff. But his idea about a person's body being like a reflection of their true nature and of their soul, I thought was really interesting. And then, oddly enough, the second figure was this French comedian named I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Remy Gaillard. Gaillard, I don't know, but he did kind of this existential comedy where he would do these outrageous stunts in public where he would dress up in funny costumes, or like he has this video where he dresses up as a snail and he crawls onto a busy road and he just starts crawling down the road like a snail, and all these cars are backed up behind him and people are getting out, and some guy runs up and like kicks him off the road and stuff. And he does all kinds of stunts like that. And he has this slogan that I won't attempt to pronounce in French, but it is it is by doing anything that you can become anyone, or by doing anything you can become anyone, something like that, very existential. And so it kind of hit me that I didn't have to keep living my life the way that I was living it. This daily dopamine quest of fast food and internet addiction was it didn't have to be that way. I could do something better, and so I could, and anything that I wanted to do, I could do. Like that was physically possible. Like there's no reason I couldn't walk out my front door and just walk like 5 miles in some direction. I could walk into the cornfield and walk for 5 miles. There was a cornfield right outside my house. Um, I could walk downtown to the public library and climb on the roof. I did that once. It was a big scandal. The police were called. It was very, very, very funny. But so I felt empowered to try to do something differently. And so, not having any idea what I was doing, I started exercising and trying to eat better. Um, I quit my fast food job and I started working at a supermarket cleaning up the parking lot. So I got a bunch of steps every day. I bought a bike. And after school, I would get on my bike on days when I didn't work, and I would just ride my bike. I would like disappear I would just like ride off into the country and ride back after dark. And I did that, and I lost like 90 pounds, and I had all these adventures. I remember doing my first pull up of my entire life when I was 19, and I was just like, this is so cool. Like I've gone from being that person to being a person who can do a pull up, and that was so cool to me because it had, and this is how it became kind of a spiritual quest. It was like I had this notion that there existed a person or a version of myself that was different from who I am now, and that I could be like that person if I did things differently. And I felt like I ought to try to be like that person. And so what I did was I tried my best and I set goals. And before I knew it, I transformed into a totally different person. It was really interesting. And some people might say that's a little bit vainglorious, but I think it is in keeping with the Christian notion that God has in mind, he has a person in mind when he creates us. And when we conform ourselves to his will, we become more like that person. And ultimately, when we go to heaven,
Yeah.
we become that person in full. We are fully purified, fully sanctified. And by the time we make it there, we are more ourselves than we've ever been. But in order to get there, first you have to give up the version of yourself that came before. He who loses his life for my sake will find it. You know, and so that's how I got into lifting. So for me, it was very much a spiritually positive sort of thing. And that's, that's the personal aspect. And then you have the pragmatic aspect, which comes next. But yeah, if you have a comment first, we can talk about
No,
that.
I want to get into that because, like, you know, you've often said that you think able-bodied, healthy men should be lifting, and it's not just a hobby. Like, you think there's an imperative. But I want to hear why.
Yeah. So when we allow our bodies to deteriorate, which they have a tendency to do in this current era, where most of us spend most of our time sitting around doing nothing, or at least nothing physical, we make burdens out of ourselves onto other people unnecessarily. There's a time to be a burden and to humbly accept that. If you're 75 years old or you become paralyzed and you need other people's assistance, you have to have the humility to allow others to help you. But if
Yeah,
you're like a 25-year-old man and everyone has to slow down so you can catch up because you're so out of shape, that should be a source of a little bit of shame. Like, maybe I can do better.
yeah,
Maybe I can be more useful, you know. And when you become able bodied, you become strong, you find very quickly that you can do so much more to serve people than you could do before. You know, I cannot tell you the amount of times in the last 5 years since I started the gym that, me and five of my guys have gone to somebody's house to help them to move their furniture or to load a truck or to accomplish some task that they couldn't do themselves, whether because they were elderly or infirm or just because it was a lot of work. And like, that's something we can do because we go to the gym. And not only can we do it, but we can do it 2 days in a row. We can help two people in a row. Um, in 2020, we had a catastrophic storm in our town that caused massive destruction, and almost everybody that we knew had some kind of horrible damage to their house or to their yard, or they had trees falling over on their cars and stuff. And me and my guys, we were all over that whole summer, and that was kind of the moment that we knew that, or that the BS that I've been telling them that whole time about lifting being a useful thing, it was suddenly true for them. Like, yeah, this made a big difference. And I was able to help my family. I was able to help all these other families. And so I would encourage anyone who's kind of stuck in that mindset that lifting weights is vainglorious or something to, and it can be, but
sure.
try to think of it in terms of how you can serve other people. And even if you're a bodybuilder, you're serving the ideal of beauty, which is not a bad thing. It is not
Yeah.
bad to be beautiful.
Yeah. So you made this point also that, again, there's the practicality, which, so yeah, I mean, if you lift, it may make you stronger, but like aesthetically, that's there's a different emphasis when you're lifting if you want to, like, build up your physique. And you say no, it's not morally problematic. Why? Yeah, I mean, why are you saying that though? Like, why do you say it is a good thing to, like, want to obtain this ideal of beauty?
I would turn the question back around on someone who asks. I would say, why do you think that being beautiful is bad? Why do you think that the pursuit of beauty is bad? You know, like, God gave us these bodies, and it said that we're going to get new bodies when we go to heaven, and they're supposed to be perfect. Do you think our perfect bodies are slovenly and ugly and pockmarked and full of blemishes? Probably not. They're probably sexy as hell, right?
Mm.
Now, to to do it for a bad reason would be like, I want to get fit so that lots of women will want to have sex with me. Okay, that's crossing into a different kind of territory there. But if beauty itself is the ideal, I don't really see anything immoral about that, and I
But
would I would
what
challenge anyone
about,
to explain why.
so, like, okay, I understand if you're trying to, like, sleep with a bunch of people, sure, but what if you're insecure and you feel like if you, like, yeah, this is where it's tricky because no, the answer to your insecurity is not to look good. It's ultimately to know that you're loved, that God, gave
Yes.
life for you. And yet, that's such a cop out too. Because, I mean, maybe you should take some more pride in your appearance. Not because that's what's going to give your life worth, but because it goes back to what you're saying about Mishumada. Like, if you recognize your worth, if you recognize God loves you, then you will take some pride, not excessive pride, but you'll take pride in the way you carry yourself, you present yourself
Oh
in
yeah.
public, but not for its own sake. I think that's the dividing line. Like, you don't
Yeah.
make an idol out of it, but it's still valuable.
yeah, and something else that I've been told by at least one priest is that we have an obligation to love ourselves. Like
Mhm.
God loves us, therefore we ought to love ourselves. And if we hate ourselves and we loathe ourselves, that is not holy. That is not of God. That is the opposite. That is the devil trying to accuse us of all of our crimes. And sometimes loving yourself means, and it means holding yourself to some kind of standard. And it means, treating your body well and with respect. And unfortunately, in this day and age, treating your body with respect almost always requires some kind of physical training outside of normal life, just because we don't get it from our daily tasks. If you're a farmer who works in the fields by hand, maybe you don't need to work out to be healthy or to be in good physical condition. But if you're a farmer who drives a tractor, you probably could stand to at
Yeah.
least take a walk every day, if not, go to the gym and work out.
So then on the flip side, we have these Christian fitness influencers who, whenever like one of these accounts pops up on my feed, like I'll often send it to you and be like, haha, how cringe. Because I mean, a lot of them, it's like they, are doing exercise and then like they pray the Hail Mary while they're lifting. And now it's Christian fitness. And it's like, well,
Mm,
you're just slapping religiosity, piety on top of going to the gym. Like, I don't see how this is like at its core a Christian kind of engagement with fitness. So yeah, what do you make of these Christian influencers and what are they missing? What's the missing link here?
yes. I would say typically, if they're selling fitness services, they are probably they're first and foremost they are salesmen working in a marketing niche, and they've learned. My one of my favorites is this account where the guy has an ad where he says, "Are you a Christian?" Or no, he says, "Are you a traditional Catholic male who makes over six
Yeah,
figures?"
yeah, I know that one.
It was like, oh geez, holy smokes! But if we're talking about accounts where maybe they're not selling anything, but they're still posting kind of these cringy gym photos and stuff. I would say it's less. The problem is less the gym and more just the way that they're using social media.
Mhm.
Um, if your relationship with the gym is primarily to like take cool pictures of yourself and put online, what is the intention there? Why post the picture? Because it looks cool, okay. But what if you took the picture and didn't post it? You could still enjoy the cool picture without getting thousands of people to click the little heart on it.
Mhm.
But probably there's some need for attention and validation there that they are using the gym for. Once again, it's a tool being used for a purpose that it may or may not accomplish, but that doesn't necessarily reflect on the problem of the tool.
Mhm.
I would encourage anyone who's upset by that kind of stuff to just not look at it, and to remember that your time in the gym is is ultimately your time. And if you're there without a camera, and if you're there by yourself or with your friends and you're training, how does somebody taking cringe photos on Instagram, how does that affect you in that way? Just like when somebody's asking me about Catholicism and they're asking me about something that happened hundreds of years ago or whatever, and I'm like, but what does that have to do with me, like going to church and saying prayers or whatever? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Um, but then there are also these priest fitness influencers. What's up with that?
Yes, that's interesting. I think social
I
media
just think it's
priests,
weird. I
yeah,
can't get
yeah,
with it. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. Social media priests, I think, have a totally different. That's another podcast.
Yes.
Not just gym influencer priests, but also social media priests in general. Like there's a guy who I follow who he's a drummer priest. And he
Mhm.
plays he plays like death metal drums, while wearing his cassock and stuff. And it's like, and it's interesting because on the one hand, it is kind of a form of ministry,
Sure.
but on the other hand, it also has the potential to be extremely cringe and extremely extremely
Well, yeah.
awkward.
I mean, I wrote a post about these social media priests. I mean, starting with like the priests who come out of the closet and then make a big show about it on Twitter. But then I include, these lifter priests and all of the above. And it's like, number one, before I'm gonna say like this is immoral and against your ministry, like it's just embarrassing. Like, do you really feel good about yourself, like having this big Twitter, Instagram presence? But then sure, like then there's a question of the ethics of it all. And yeah, I don't know. I just it's kind of weird seeing priests posting like flexing pictures because I'm like, is that what you're here to do? I don't know. It's
Mm,
just it's awkward, very awkward. Keep them to yourself, ideally. But anyway, so yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the whole phenomenon of social media priests is interesting because typically a priest's job is to serve his parish where he's assigned, right? But certain priests seem to be set aside for this more public presence, right? I think of like Father Mike Schmitz, for example. I mean, whatever people say about him, he had the most popular podcast in the world a couple of years ago, and it was a Catholic priest reading the Bible. Like, can't get too angry about that. But but at the same time, he is a priest at a parish, and how does it feel to what is it like to be a member of that parish? Does that priest have time for everybody in that parish, or is he too busy with all his engagements? I don't know. I've never known a famous priest, so I don't know. But I suspect that would be that'll be a topic of conversation, maybe for the next pope.
Perhaps, perhaps. Yeah, it's an interesting point because I think there's again, this is for another podcast, but like I do see a difference between so like Father Schmitz, who's working for a larger Catholic publishing company versus a certain other priest who like runs his own company and like has to make decisions based on like the marketability and the income. Like that's when I start to get nervous about whether their ministry is compromised. But again, it's another conversation. So, okay, so the verdict is people should lift, they should aspire to be beautiful within reason, and that if you don't really feel like you have, like your father isn't really present in your life, don't go on the internet, like go find a real father figure, someone who you can actually have a relationship with. Yeah, what else do we want to leave the people with before we wrap up?
Yeah, yeah. My biggest concern with the internet influencers as father figures is the lack of a real relationship,
Yeah.
because a relationship with a father, whether it's a father figure or your real father, it's a relationship. It's not a one-sided thing where you look at this guy as being like the archetype of masculinity who you want to be like. Your father is a human being with flaws just like you, and he loves you in spite of your flaws, and you love him in spite of his flaws. Whereas with influencers, when they have flaws, people leave. They're like, oh, I can't like this guy anymore. He's got this problem. He's got this problematic opinion, or he made this mistake. Like imagine Jordan Peterson going to rehab for being addicted to painkillers. Imagine disregarding your own father because he made the same mistake. I couldn't do that. That would be that's one of those glaring examples of how it's not really the same. But I wanted on the fatherhood note, I wanted to talk about quickly. The two things to avoid as a father are making fatherhood all about yourself and trying to make yourself into some kind of type of man in order to be a good father. You don't need to do that. Just love your kids. Um, and then the second would be, do not imagine that it's your job to make your kid into a certain kind of person. That's between them and God. What you can do is tell them the truth and try to, be a loving father to them. And through your example, may you, nudge them into the right thing. And
Yeah.
then if you can do those two things, you can be a great father, whether you lift weights or not. Although lifting weights is a good thing.
So if people want to follow your stuff, there's your Instagram, your Twitter, the gym's Instagram. Anything else you want to plug before we let the people go?
Yeah. Well, no, nothing else. But yes. So my gym Instagram is where I post the most. That's where I post more topical things. And then I got my personal Instagram, which is Joey Nabbles. I post mediocre guitar playing and some thoughts that I think are not appropriate for the gym. And then I have my Twitter where I post like once a month because I'm too much of a boomer for posting on Twitter. But that's that's about the extent of it. If you want to anyone wants to come and visit my gym, we're in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Anyone who visits can come and hang out for free. I won't charge you for a day pass or anything like that. Would love to talk about Cranks and Pomo with anyone who lives in the area.
Absolutely. Where is Iowa? I've never heard of that
Yeah.
place. In the middle of
Yes.
nowhere.
Yes. Yes. Iowa is a centrally located Midwestern state, south of Minnesota, west of Illinois, north of Missouri, where you are sandwiched in between two beautiful rivers, the Mississippi River on the east, which is industrial and wealthy, and then you have the Missouri River on the west, which is wild and untamed. And conversely, the eastern half of the state is more industrial and the western half is more rural. And you have this beautiful conflict between the urban and the rural that is centered in the capital, Des Moines, which is right near the center of the state. And I should also mention that Iowa is one of the few states in the Midwest where the vast majority of the population lives in small towns, and
Hmm.
only about 1/4 of the population live in the top five most populated cities. And
Oh,
so Iowa has some really cool things going for it. I'm actually a big fan of the place. I could probably talk about it for a whole other podcast episode, but I will spare everyone the details and encourage them to look at Wikipedia.
perfect. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on once again.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen. Very happy to be here.